Well, hello, good evening to you, Salma and Adam. Welcome to both of you as well. So we'll begin this hour with breaking news, and explosions have been heard in parts of Iran. That after Donald Trump said that Iranian targets would be attacked very hard. US Central Command confirming that strikes began about 45 minutes ago. Well, the US president claims a deal between the two countries is fully negotiated, but warns Tehran is tapping and hasn't signed it yet.
If they had a nuclear weapon, there'd be no Israel, there'd be no Middle East, and they would have absolutely shot at us. So we'll see what happens. But we hit them hard yesterday, and we're going to hit them again hard today, in case you miss it, in case you don't turn on your television set. And we'll see what happens with the deal. We were really close to a deal, but they keep tapping us along. They keep playing us for suckers because, you know what? They dealt with some very stupid presidents. I have to say that. I'm embarrassed to say it. Some very stupid people were sitting here.
So let's speak to our US correspondent, David Blevins. Certainly, Iranian media reporting explosions have been heard, for example, in Bandar Abbas and in Minab, many of these areas surrounding the Iranian coast of the Strait of Hormuz, sirens sounding also in West Tehran. What's the strategy here, David?
Well, the only real guidance on the strategy right now is coming from US Central Command, Anna. What we've heard from them in the last half hour is that their forces began launching what they're describing as additional self-defence strikes at 5:15 p.m. Eastern Time, so 10:15 in the UK, against multiple targets in Iran at the Commander-in-Chief's direction. They go on to say the strikes are in response to what they call Iran's unwarranted and continued aggression. So in the space of just 2 days, we've gone from President Trump telling us that he could be just 2 days away from a deal with Iran to the Commander-in-Chief ordering strikes on Iran for the second consecutive night. Now, he will argue that this is in response to Iran downing a US Apache helicopter a couple of days ago. The two pilots were very lucky to escape that. But America did respond by firing more than 20 missiles at military targets in Iran last night, and Iran retaliated, hitting US bases in Bahrain, Jordan and Kuwait. So it is quite interesting that the president has decided to embark on a second night of this. Earlier today, he said that Iran had been too slow to reach agreement and would now pay the price. When he was pressed by reporters on what the price might be, he said we're going to hit them for a second night. And then the man who calls himself Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, doubled down on that. He's been visiting Central Command in Tampa, Florida, and he said, if we need to negotiate with bombs, we will negotiate with bombs. So we do appear to have entered a very dangerous tit-for-tat cycle in which we could see the ceasefire collapse altogether.
Yes, just reading it as well, Iran's Mehr news agency reporting clashes at sea between Iranian and US forces, clashes at sea, David. Also reports of several explosions heard in the Iranian port of Gorgon. Iran's Press TV says a location in Sirik has been hit by enemy projectiles as well. And I also see that US crude oil futures have jumped $2 in early trade after the US launched new strikes on targets in Iran. I mean, let's all remember this costs us, doesn't it, David?
Yes, it does. And I think that's one of the things that the president is acutely aware of right now, not least because inflation jumped to a staggering 4.2% in the United States today. That's the highest level in 3 years. Because consumers here are really feeling the strain of a war that has lasted much longer than they anticipated. The website Axios here in the United States was reporting a short time ago that the president had met with his national security team in the Situation Room at the White House this evening. They were speculating that one of the options on the table for him was a more severe round of strikes tonight compared to last night, but that it would be sharp. So it does appear, perhaps, Anna, that he is attempting to bounce Iran into a deal. That's not the first time we've seen him deploy that tactic. It has never worked in the past. And the real danger for him is that it could lead to an escalation of this war, a complete breakdown of the ceasefire. And the war is into what, day 103? And people across the United States are very, very weary of it. It is midterm election year, and this is the president who told them he would not bring them back into a long foreign war.
David, for the moment, thanks very much indeed. And yes, certainly earlier Donald Trump had posted on Truth Social saying last month, I directed our great US military to execute a secret mission to support oil tankers and other commercial ships through the Strait of Hormuz. Today, I'm pleased to announce that this effort has resulted in more than 100 million barrels of oil making its way through the strait and into the open market. So suggesting he's got this secret mission underway. More than 200 commercial ships, he said, have safely travelled through the strait. This wildly successful effort is because the US controls the Strait of Hormuz. Is that simply wishful thinking, do you think?
I think that there was always a plan that was discussed about the US naval support for commercial vessels to be able to guide them through the straits. And I think that that was an idea to kind of provide a bit of a bridge for supply whilst we were negotiating terms with the Iranians. That has not happened. Even if they continue this kind of mission, they will inevitably become targets. And also, it is unsustainable to have that kind of escort service over the long term to be able to get things out of the Strait of Hormuz. So even if we are talking about this having been successful on occasion, this is not a long-term solution for what David has just described, which is very real economic pain for Americans, not just Americans, the whole world today.
I have to say I haven't seen any of that reported independently, so I'm not sure whether it's happened. It may have happened, but it would be a major development. But the truth of the matter is, there are three things tonight. One is, if Hegseth is saying you can bomb people at the negotiating table, it doesn't work. Didn't happen. Didn't happen in Gaza. Hasn't happened with the Iranians already. It won't happen. The other thing, of course, is that none of this brings things closer to, A, stopping Iran's nuclear program, which, as we're hearing from President Trump, very stupid presidents such as Barack Obama managed to do with the JCPOA. But also, there's nothing about opening up the Straits of Hormuz. And frankly, if there's fighting at sea in the Straits of Hormuz, as is being reported by those agencies, then we're, further away than ever from having free passage through the Straits of Hormuz.
Yes, and certainly reports earlier that they'd fired towards a ship's engine room after the crew repeatedly failed to comply with directions from American forces. So that happened earlier. India
yesterday, didn't
forced
it?
Yeah, exactly. India forced to summon the US Deputy Chief of Mission to the country after lodging a strong complaint. And certainly the Iranian ambassador to the UN has said earlier this evening, Iran has never negotiated under threats, will never submit to pressure or coercion. So it's exactly the point you're making. Explosions heard in Sirik as well a little earlier, half an hour or so ago. Explosions heard in Minab again. That's another of those cities not far from the Strait of Hormuz, slightly inland. And Iran's state media says initial reports indicate US ships near the Strait of Hormuz were targeted by missile and drones launched by Iranian armed forces. Then you start to see, as David was suggesting, the breakdown of the ceasefire. Should we just see what happens? Any further thoughts on that?
Well, I think the reality is that we are getting to a point. If the self-styled Secretary of War is saying that we're going to bomb people to the negotiating table, I think we can absolutely see that the breakdown of the ceasefire is coming. I mean, you've just talked about the oil futures pricing. I think the markets are already reacting to that because it's going to be a general assumption. There are other aspects to this as well, of course, because this is not a bilateral conflict between the US and Iran. This is as a consequence of Iranian influence in the Middle East, particularly on Israel and Israeli security. So I think we also have to recognise that there is a different dynamic at play here that means that this has widened the conflict in the Middle East and it's not showing any signs of abating, certainly with these new strikes.
Yes, and lines are dropping all the time, so we'll keep an eye on that and return to it. But Well, let's just bring you the very latest on Iran. We heard from US CENTCOM, US Central Command, that the Americans had renewed their attacks as they did last night at 5:15 Eastern Time. That's 10:15 p.m. here in the UK. We've seen and heard a number of explosions, according to Iranian media. The Iranians have now started speaking about the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran's top joint military command says there is a closure order now on the Strait of Hormuz, which includes oil tankers and commercial ships. They also suggest that 2 violating ships attempting passage through the Strait of Hormuz were hit. They go on to say that any vessel that attempts passage will be targeted. So we will bring you more on that. I'm also seeing that Russia says a region there is under drone attack from the Ukrainians. So more on all those stories to come.
Tom Parmenter there. Now, explosions have been heard in parts of Iran after Donald Trump said Iranian targets would be attacked very hard. On Wednesday night, US Central Command said it carried out strikes on Iranian air defense, ground control stations and surveillance radar sites. Iranian state media reported explosions in the Sirik area and the city of Bandar Abbas. Iran's Revolutionary Guard said it attacked America's 5th Fleet in Bahrain using drones and also targeted the Al Azraq air base in Jordan. Our US correspondent David Blevins has the latest information coming to us from US Central Command.
What we've heard from them in the last half hour is that their forces began launching what they're describing as additional self-defence strikes at 5:15 p.m. Eastern Time, so 10:15 in the UK, against multiple targets in Iran at the Commander-in-Chief's direction. They go on to say the strikes are in response to what they call Iran's unwarranted and continued aggression. So in the space of just 2 days, we've gone from President Trump telling us that he could be just 2 days away from a deal with Iran to the Commander-in-Chief ordering strikes on Iran for the 2nd consecutive night. Now, he will argue that this is in response to Iran downing a US Apache helicopter a couple of days ago. The 2 pilots were very lucky to escape that. But America did respond by firing more than 20 missiles at military targets in Iran last night, and Iran retaliated, hitting US bases in Bahrain, Jordan and Kuwait. So it is quite interesting that the president has decided to embark on a 2nd night of this. Earlier today, he said that Iran had been too slow to reach agreement and would now pay the price. When he was pressed by reporters on what the price might be, he said we're going to hit them for a 2nd night. And then the man who calls himself Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, doubled down on that. He's been visiting Central Command in Tampa, Florida, and he said if we need to negotiate with bombs, we will negotiate with bombs. So we do appear to have entered a very dangerous tit-for-tat cycle in which we could see the ceasefire collapse altogether.